Seraphine Voss had always known how to be invisible. She had learned it early, the way children learn most useful things, not from a lesson, but from watching. She watched her mother smile and step aside. She watched women with no rank make themselves smaller, so that men with all the rank would feel larger. She learned that invisibility was not weakness, it was a skill. And like most skills, once you had it, you could choose when to use it. On the night of the claiming summit, she chose not to use it. She arrived late, because she had been with a sick child on the other side of the territory. She had not changed her clothes. She still wore her healer's satchel across one shoulder, still had dried lavender tucked into her braid from the morning's work. 46 other women stood in the great hall in their finest. Seraphine stood at the back in her everyday things, and looked at no one in particular. She was not trying to be noticed, she was just tired. But the Alpha King noticed her anyway. Dorian Blackthorne was not a man who showed what he felt. He had been taught from a very young age that feelings were information, not performance. You felt them privately. You acted from reason. His father had raised him this way, and his father's father before that, and the throne of the 5 Packs had been held by that kind of man for 3 generations. Iron and logic, no softness, no hesitation. So when something in him shifted the moment Seraphine walked into the back of the hall, he registered it the way he registered all inconvenient information. He filed it away and continued the meeting. He spoke to her afterward, privately, in the corridor while the hall was still loud with conversation. He told her she had been selected. He told her the formal arrangement would be made within the week. He told her this the way he told people about treaties and border decisions. Straightforward, final, efficient. Seraphine looked at him for a moment, with eyes that were very calm and very direct. Then she said, "I'll consider it." He waited for something else. She said nothing else. She adjusted the strap of her satchel and walked away. In 12 years of ruling, no one had ever said that to him. His council told him yes. His enforcers said yes. Women at every summit said yes before he had even finished the sentence. He stood in the corridor for several seconds longer than he needed to, which was something he had not done in a very long time. He told himself it was the novelty. He told himself she was simply inexperienced with protocol. He told himself he would have his beta send word, and the matter would be sorted quickly. The word was sent 3 times over the next 6 weeks. Each time, Seraphine responded through the proper channels, politely and specifically. She was attending a difficult birth. She was nursing a child with a high fever through the worst of it. She was required at the elder's house for daily care that could not be interrupted. Each reason was real. He had people check. And so 6 weeks passed, and nothing was settled, and Dorian Blackthorne, who had never waited for anything, found himself waiting without quite meaning to. What he did not know, because he had never asked, was what those 6 weeks looked like from Seraphine's side. She felt it too, the pull between them. She was not indifferent to it. She had felt it the moment she stepped into that hall, a warmth that had nothing to do with the firelight and everything to do with a force older than protocol. But Seraphine had also watched what happened to women who followed that pull without thinking. She had watched her mother follow it. She had watched the Pack's previous Luna receive public corrections from a man who thanked her only in private. She had watched women enter arrangements that sounded like choices and become something else entirely over time. She was not afraid of love. She was precise about the conditions under which she would let it in. She wanted to be chosen, not processed. There was a difference, and she believed it mattered, and she was willing to wait to see if Dorian Blackthorne understood the difference or not. On the night of the harvest bonfire, she got her first real answer. The bonfire was a territory-wide celebration, and on that night the lines of rank softened. People ate together who did not usually eat together. Children ran between the adults without being told to slow down. The music was too loud for formal conversation. Seraphine sat on the stone wall at the edge of the firelight, watching 2 young pups chase glowing embers that rose and floated and disappeared. An elderly woman was telling her something funny about a goat and a market cart, and Seraphine was laughing, really laughing, in the uncalculated way that only happens when you have forgotten to be careful. Dorian found her there. He told himself it was by accident. He was not sure that was true. He sat beside her, not as the Alpha King, just as a man who had run out of reasons to stay on the other side of the bonfire. They talked for 2 hours, not about politics, not about the bond or the summit or any of the administrative business that sat between them. They talked about a book she had been reading on plant medicines from the far north. They talked about whether ravens could actually be trained as messengers, or if that was just a rumor someone had invented to sound interesting. They talked about whether cold air made the stars look different, or if everyone just looked at them more carefully in winter. He walked her home. He did not try to claim the moment as something it was not. She did not invite him in, and he did not ask. They stood at her door for a moment in the quiet, and then he walked back through the dark, and she stood inside her cottage and pressed her hand flat against her chest, like she was checking that everything in there was still in its right place. It was, but it was arranged slightly differently than before. 3 days later, Dorian sat across from a delegation from the Eastern Ridge Pack. Their proposal was clear: an alliance through a formal mating with the Eastern Alpha's niece, a woman named Lorena, powerful, well-connected, politically logical. His counsel nodded around the table. Dorian looked at the papers and thought about ravens and stars and the way a woman could laugh and forget to perform. He told himself he would address things with Seraphine after the negotiations were settled. After. As if time was something he controlled. He did not know that even as he sat in that meeting and made his careful calculations, word was already moving through the territory the way all important news moves when the people it concerns have no formal access to it. Through the marketplace, through neighbors, through the ordinary conversations of ordinary people who do not know they are carrying something heavy. A woman found Seraphine at the market on a Thursday morning. The woman's daughter had nearly died the previous winter, and Seraphine had sat with her through 3 nights of it. The woman told her about the Eastern Ridge negotiations with the warmth of someone sharing interesting news, not realizing she was setting something down in front of Seraphine that could not be picked back up. Seraphine thanked her. She finished her errands. She walked home. She sat in her cottage for a long time without lighting a lamp. She did not feel the sharp, hot thing she had expected to feel. She felt something quieter and, in some ways, worse. A recognition. The particular recognition of someone who had suspected a thing and kept hoping to be wrong and has now been confirmed right. She had been a consideration, a variable in an equation, a summit attendee who had said the interesting word and made the Alpha King pause briefly before returning to the calculations that had always run his life. She also, that same week, confirmed what she had been quietly noting for some time. The missed cycles. The particular tiredness that felt different from ordinary tiredness. She was a healer. She knew what the signs meant. She confirmed it herself with the same steady hands she used for everyone else. She was carrying the Alpha King's heir. The bond between them, biological and specific, and not interested in anyone's plans, had already done what it does. She sat with this new information for 2 days. She did not cry. She did not rage. She thought carefully and honestly about what she wanted, what was right, and what she was willing to accept. And then she packed. She took her medical texts. She took her mother's ring. She took 3 changes of clothing and the small jar of dried rosemary she kept on the windowsill, because the smell of it made her feel steady. She left behind everything that had not been hers to begin with. She did not write a letter. She started one, and then stopped, because there was too much to say, and none of it would land right with a man who had not yet learned how to receive it. She burned what she had written, and walked out her door in the early dark, before the territory woke up. The border wolf on night watch was a young man named Kale, whose wrist she had set 2 winters ago. He looked at her. He looked at her bag. He looked at her face. He stepped aside without a word. She crossed into neutral territory and did not look back. Not because she did not care, but because she knew herself. She knew that if she turned around and saw the firelight of the territory she had spent her whole life in, she would hesitate, and she could not afford to hesitate. The women who had come before her, who had stayed, who had bent themselves into shapes they were not meant to hold, they had hesitated. She would not make the same mistake. She had a contact at a healing post 3 packs away, in a border settlement called Greyfen. She had arranged work there. She had a plan. She had always had a plan. It took Dorian 4 days to understand she was gone. On day 5, something in the bond went quiet in a way that was physically alarming. like a sound he had stopped hearing only when it stopped. He sent his beta to her cottage. His beta came back with no good news. He went himself. The cottage smelled of lavender and rosemary. The jar on the windowsill was gone. The medical texts were gone. The personal things were gone. What remained was tidy, clean, and empty in the particular way that means someone left on purpose. The elderly neighbor who grew herbs for Seraphine's tinctures watched him from her doorway. After a while, she said, "She didn't leave you a letter. She said you wouldn't have read it the right way anyhow." Dorian stood in the empty cottage in the dark for a long time after the neighbor went back inside. He did not send hunters. He went himself, with only Marcus. This was either the first wise decision he had made in the whole matter, or the first one that felt honest, or both. He traveled for nearly 2 weeks. Along the way, he spoke to people who knew Seraphine, a mother who told him about 3 nights in winter when she had not slept so that her daughter could survive. A traveling merchant who said the healer girl had fixed his horse's leg and refused payment, said he looked like he needed the coin more. An elder woman who told him flatly, "That family has never asked anyone for anything in 3 generations. Don't you mistake that for weakness." By the time he arrived in Greyfen, he understood something he had not understood when he left. He had spent 6 weeks waiting for Seraphine to come to him, and all that time he had been building a portrait of who she was, from what she could offer him. The portrait built from other people's words was something else entirely, a woman who showed up, who stayed, who gave without keeping account. He had not asked what she needed. He had not asked who she was. He had assumed she would fold herself into whatever shape the situation required, the way everyone else did. He found her in a converted storage room that she had turned into a small healing post. She was working when he arrived. She saw him the same moment he saw her, and she finished what she was doing first. Bandaged the arm of the man she had been treating, thanked him, cleaned her hands, before she turned to face Dorian. She was 4 months along. She looked well. She looked settled. She looked like someone who had made a decision, and was living inside it without regret. "You look terrible," she said. It was not unkind. It was the first honest thing that had been said between them. He told her she was right. He told her he had made her a strategy when she should have been a choice, and that he had done it because he did not know how to choose things he was afraid of losing. He told her this quietly, standing in her doorway, without ceremony or performance. It was not enough. Both of them knew that. But it was the first true thing he had said to her, and she registered it the way she registered all honest things, carefully, without rushing her response. She told him about the child. He told her he had known, or suspected, in the way the bond communicates without words. She asked why he had not come sooner. He had no good answer. She nodded. The absence of a good answer was its own answer, and she had expected it. What she offered him was not forgiveness on a timeline, or a return to the life she had left. What she offered him was a conversation, an ongoing one, with her able to leave at any point, until or unless she decided something different. She was not punishing him. She was protecting herself with the only thing she had always reliably owned, her own judgment. He stayed in Greyfen for 6 weeks. He helped carry herbs from the market because she was pregnant and there was no one else. He learned, badly at first and then less badly, how to assist in a healing post. He sat with frightened people and tried not to fix their fear, just to be present in it with them, which turned out to be harder than fixing things and more useful. They had difficult conversations at small tables, over meals neither of them cooked well. He told her about his father and the kind of man he had been trained to become. She told him about her mother and the kind of silence that fills a woman who stops taking up space. These conversations were not comfortable. They were real, and real was what they had both been missing. Seraphine watched him when he did not know he was being watched. She was looking for the man underneath the calculations, to see if there was something there worth building toward. What she found was not a transformed person. It was the same man, with the hardness slowly wearing away, not because she was softening him, but because honesty does that to people if they let it. She found it was enough to work with. The child came on a quiet morning, in the same room where Seraphine had been caring for others. Dorian held her hand through all of it, with the grip of someone discovering they have never before done something that mattered this much. The baby was a girl, born healthy and very loud about it. He held her afterward and was very still for a long time. Seraphine named her Mara, after her own mother. Dorian said nothing. He wrote it in the record book in the same careful handwriting he used for everything official, and for the first time in his governing life, he felt that what he was writing down was something he had earned the right to record. They returned to Silver Ridge when Mara was 8 weeks old. The terms of the return were Seraphine's, stated clearly and agreed to in writing. This caused private alarm among several council members, who felt that written agreements between the Alpha King and his mate set an unusual precedent. Seraphine had anticipated this concern and had requested the written agreement precisely for that reason. The claiming ceremony was the smallest one in the territory's history. There was no great hall. There was a clearing at the edge of the forest, on an ordinary night, with an ordinary moon, and 2 people who had spent the better part of a year learning whether they could choose each other honestly, without one of them disappearing in the process. Seraphine did not kneel. This was technically a breach of tradition. Not a single person raised an objection, because Dorian had made it clear, quietly and without room for debate, that his Luna knelt to no one. In the years that followed, the court learned to address her by her name. She continued to practice healing, because she was good at it, and because it was hers. Their daughter grew up watching her mother be listened to in rooms where women were usually only decorative, and she grew up thinking this was ordinary. It was not ordinary. It had been fought for, quietly and without a single dramatic moment, by a woman who packed a bag and crossed a border, and trusted herself when no one was watching. Dorian Blackthorne became, over time, a better king. Not because power changed him, but because one specific person had refused to let him remain unchanged. He was not a perfect man. He was a man who had learned the difference between holding something and deserving it, and who had chosen, finally, to do the slower and harder work of deserving. People in the territory talked about the Luna who had walked away, and the king who had followed, and the story they told mostly focused on the romance of it, the bond, the reunion, the quiet ceremony under the trees. What they left out, because they did not know it, was the part that mattered most. She had left without looking back, not because she stopped caring, but because she knew that the women who look back are the ones who stay for the wrong reasons. She had walked forward into an uncertain life because she believed, in the deep and unshakable part of herself, that she deserved to be chosen for real. And she had been right. That is the thing about women who know their worth. They do not always get it immediately. They do not always get it easily, but they tend, eventually, to get it. And the men who are wise enough to understand what they almost lost tend never to forget the sound of a door closing quietly behind someone who deserved better than what they were given. Dorian Blackthorne never forgot it. He was grateful, every ordinary day that followed, that he had caught up before it was too late to matter.